whenever I give a talk somewhere to a general audience about robots, somebody always asks me the question about jobs. Won't robots take our jobs away? And the argument that I usually make is, yeah, they're going to take some jobs away, and that's uncomfortable. But the alternative is, if we don't have robots working in factories, the likelihood is we will lose the industry entirely. So we're making a bit of a trade. We're going to keep the industry. For instance, we're going to keep manufacturing automobiles in a high labor cost country, and it's going to employ some people, and it's going to employ some taxes, and there's going to be a big sort of knock-on economic benefit. But yeah, absolutely, it will have some impact on jobs. More recently, there's been quite a bit written about the so-called new machine age, where a whole raft of jobs, not necessarily manual labor jobs, a lot of so-called knowledge worker jobs will perhaps disappear, like interpreting x-rays and writing financial reports. These are jobs now that are on the line. Once upon a time, very famous philosopher Voltaire talked about the virtues of work, and many of us define ourselves, our identity, our self-esteem is all wrapped up in work. So this seems to be perhaps the most exquisitely complex of all the topics that we've talked about today. What does ethics say about this?
Our identity is locked up in what we do, often, for most of us, right? And our fundamental moral philosophy that guides most of us comes out of John Locke's theory of labor. John Locke's theory of labor is the foundation to the rights to property. And that, in itself, set up the property rights basis of the American Constitution. So the rights to property and how we define ourselves and how we define our culture is locked up in what we do. And it's entrenched in terms of liberal democracy, the labor theory, and utilitarianism. All three of those philosophical perspectives guide us in terms of how we set our values. Now, with respect to machines replacing humans, you'll be very familiar with the Luddite Revolution.
Absolutely.
During the early Industrial Revolution. Where
the guys with big hammers.
Yep. They went in and they smashed out the cotton mills. I think it was about 1790. They went in there and just went to town on the cotton mills because they were afraid, and they were quite right in this, that the cotton mills are going to replace their jobs. And they did. Of course, the Luddites were all duly hanged very quickly. The Victorian rules for misconduct were some of the most severe in the history of the world. But thank heavens we don't have so many hard laws anymore. But the Luddites had a justified position. However, that's been with us since machines have been with us, that fear, that innate fear that we're going to lose not only our jobs, but our identity and who we are.
And since industrialization, there are so many jobs have been created and then disappeared.
Correct.
Right?
It seems to ebb and flow. We're getting more and more people in the labor market. Australia, in the last 50 years has doubled in population. We have more people working. So I might be a little ignorant on this, but from what I can see is that we adapt. It's one of the most interesting things about the human being is our ability to adapt and to change. And we seem to be doing that. And so this innate fear of losing our jobs to machines seems to be unfounded. However, I understand it. In terms of ethics, really it's not an ethical position that you can take. I guess individuals need to have the autonomy to choose and to be able to work and to be able to live in a free environment and to have access to those resources. So that's very important ethically. But the argument that machines are going to take that away, I've seen some evidence of it recently with the closure of the Holden facilities in South Australia. But bottom line is, now we're talking about submarines, I think yesterday on the news.
Yep.
And integrating maybe more work back into Australia instead of putting it into Japan for redesigning and rebuilding submarines back in Australia. So, it ebbs and flows.
So in the case of an individual, if they don't have a job, the ethical consideration here is whether we impinge on their autonomy.
Yes, correct. And their basic right to have a fulfilled life, right, in this culture.
But in our culture, fulfilled life usually includes a job.
Well, it includes the right to work and the right to have access to work and resources. Yes, it does.
So we could put a roof over people's heads, we could make sure that they're not hungry, and so they would be in some sense looked after, comfortable, but they may not have the option of a job.
Well, I think the bigger question is, are machines taking away jobs? In other words, if we look at,
In an overall sense,
Yeah.
yes, they're going to take away some, but then other jobs are going to come.
and other jobs will be created with the machines. So there seems to be a balance there, and as long as there's a balance, and I think that there's a cohesion in terms of the creation of jobs and the loss of jobs, that seems to be working. I don't have stats on that, but that would be an interesting.
I mean,
sort
it's the way it's gone for 100 years or more.
Absolutely, yeah.
The issue is whether we're going to get to some kind of tipping point where suddenly that no longer holds, and there are some books that say that that's the case, but I don't think I'm not sure if anyone can make a hard or firm prediction about that.
Yeah, so I don't have an answer to that, because if it's the case, let's project.
Okay.
If it's the case, say in 100 years, that machines have really pretty much replaced you and me.
Yep.
We don't need professors anymore. They've got an android there that forgot more about ethics than Doug Baker will ever know, and we've got another one over here that, well, he's got Peter Cork's brain programmed into him, and he's got about 3 more other brains programmed into him, and he can teach everything there is about robotics. So the question then is what do guys like you and me do? We'd probably be doing something, but I'm not sure what. The question then is, if we have the jobs taken over by machines, what do humans do? Do we get value for that? Or maybe we retire at the age of 30. Or maybe we don't work. I don't know.
Which is the other
environment
thing
like
that I think as we grew up, right, we talked about that the people would be retiring earlier and all this. And that didn't happen either.
No.
Retiring age going up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is going up. I don't know what that's about.
No. But I think it's a bad idea.
That's true. But I think that this, in terms of ethics, the taking away of jobs, I think we need to look at the bigger picture and the balance of what's created and what's taken away before we can make that argument. But really isn't an argument for ethics. It's an argument, it can be an argument for autonomy, but overall, I don't see it as an ethical issue.